Grab some popcorn and hop on our time machine as we take you back to season 1. In our Halloween episode, Amanda introduced you to award-winning author Steve Altier and his book, The Lizardville Ghost Stories, specifically book 1, The Camping Trip. These books are in the YA mystery genre, and they take readers on an adventure where ghost stories aren't always just pretend.
Average Goodreads rating of 4.34 and an Amazon average of 4.7, Steve continues to entertain readers of all ages with his books and stories. Welcome, Steve.
Well, hello, I'm glad to be here.
Well, Steve, we are so thrilled to have you with us today, especially since last year, Amanda and I just went down this rabbit hole of trying to figure out why they call this town Lizardville. So I feel like we're coming full circle to have you with us today.
So I'm actually looking at my pictures right now. So where I met Steve was at the Suncoast Comic Con, and apparently that was April 24th, 2022. Was not looking for Steve, was not looking for Lizardville, but I just happened to be walking around. And as we've said in multiple podcasts before, I tend to just find authors and collect books at a lot of these cons because that's where you tend to find neat books that you don't find anywhere else. So, and as you've heard in other podcast episodes we've done, I also have pet lizards and am a big fan of lizards, and saw a big sign that said Lizardville. Was like, oh my gosh, I need to go find out about this book. Well, I was initially a little bit disappointed it was not actually about lizards. Okay. But talked to Steve. Steve's very nice. And Steve talked to me about Lizardville is the name of the town, but don't walk away yet. It's actually ghost stories and this and all these other things, adventures and things that go into it. And I was like, all right, well, actually, I am a fan of ghost stories, so I guess I'm still buying the book. Steve signed my book, autographed it for me, and posed for a picture with me. And that is how I ended up with the first book of the Lizardville series. Then when it came time to do the Halloween episode, and Shannon said, hey, we need a book, I was like, oh my gosh, I've got the perfect one.
It was a pleasure meeting you, Amanda. I love talking about my books. So when people come up, and I get that a lot when people say, oh, it's not about lizards. No, and unfortunately it's not.
Well, why don't we just dive in, Steve, and why don't you give our listeners, tell us a little bit about the Lizardville Ghost series.
So the Lizardville Ghost Stories, I'll take you back to when I was a child. I grew up in the dam keeper's house in Mill Hall, Pennsylvania. The road we lived on was Lizardville Road. That's where it got the nickname. Lizardville's not really the name of the town, but that's just the nickname. The rumors when I grew up as a kid, Lizardville they said there was an old axe factory there, which was a lot of remnants and stuff when I was still a kid. That was my playground. We played there. Mom always told us to stay out of the old factories, which meant I had to go in. You know, we would go in and explore, and the rumors around the neighborhood and stuff were that the owner of the old factory back in the early 1900s used to collect lizards from other countries and bring them here. And now that they roam the forest. As a kid, I don't ever remember seeing a lizard. But the Lizardville Ghost Stories are set in the 1970s, loosely based off my childhood. For the most part, it's a group of young guys going out along the banks of Big Fishing Creek, where there's an old abandoned axe factory. And the oldest guy, he wants to scare the young ones. So he tells them the legends of the axe factory murders. And inadvertently, that wakes up the spirit world, and chaos begins.
Chaos. I love the chaos. And so it's interesting. So obviously your own childhood and your own experiences were part of your inspiration. But I always like to ask, when we have an author who does horror or does mystery, was there any specific book that inspired you to become an author and kind of go down this genre path that you're on?
Well, yeah, that's a great question. When I was growing up as a kid, I really was more into sports, and so was my dad. I wasn't a huge reader, but it was in the 70s that Carrie was coming out at the movie theaters, which was by Stephen King. And a friend of mine was like, we got to go see this movie. I'm like, yeah, I want to see it. And he said, but you got to read the book first. So I'm like, okay. So he gave me the book. I read the book, fell in love with the way he told a story. But then we went to the theaters. The movie was great too, but I could not get it out of my mind how Stephen King writes, the detail he goes into. I just felt like I was living that experience. From that point on, I used to start writing little stories and trying to, be him.
And I think it's interesting, you mentioned his style and you liked it. How has your writing process developed over the years? Now, we're going to talk a little bit more about some other books you have coming up, but you have several books. Has your process changed?
Well, I think with each book that you write, I look back, continue to grow as an author. So I look back at what I wrote 10, 12 years ago, and I was like, oh my gosh, I wrote that? No, I could not have written that story like that. So I think with every story that you tell, that you write, you continue to grow. I've learned how to focus more on showing, less telling. The more you read, the more you write, the better you get.
Absolutely. And so for this particular series, the Lizardville Ghost Series, how many books can we expect to be in this series?
Well, there's going to be a total of 6. There's the side story series, and then there are the Lizardville Ghost Stories. The Lizardville Ghost Stories is a trilogy. It's a set of 3 books. The first one being The Camping Trip, the second one being Jimmy's Curse, and the third one, which I just finished up and I'm getting over to my editor now with the publisher, that is The Return to Lizardville. And that'll wrap up that entire series. But like I mentioned, there are a couple of side stories, and there's going to be 3 side stories. The first one is The Ghost Hunter. My newest release, which just coming out, Old Man Smithers, is another side story. And the third one, I haven't written it yet, so I can't really talk about the title on that one, but that one is coming early next year. And I am also, I work on some other stories as well. Pretty much standalone stories, but they have some relevance to the main storyline.
And I find it interesting. I know we talked a little bit at the beginning that technically this is in the YA genre, mystery, horror, that type of stuff. But I was looking through your Goodread reviews, I was looking at your Amazon reviews, and one of the consistent themes I'm seeing is this is for any age. Adults are loving it. I mean, Amanda said she loved it.
Definitely.
So are you writing with that larger scope in mind, not necessarily that YA bracket, but really anybody that loves these type of stories?
Well, they're considered YA, but I also consider them new adult. New adults kind of replacing YA, so it's that 12 to 13 age group to all the way to 30. But I do agree that a lot of adults that have read this, especially, the 40 and up, so they're like, man, that took me back to my childhood, and I love it. That's really what I'm trying to capture, is a little mix of everything. I want to write a book that's for everybody.
I think you definitely did that with this one. And I love how you said, when people tell you, I read a book and it took me back to my childhood, that is what I'm looking for when I read, whether it's classified as a young adult or a new adult or whatever type adult book. I could think of certainly, books that when I read it, I forget that I'm a grown up that has to pay bills for a little bit. My brain gets to take a vacation.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
One of your reviewers, I liked one of the things that they said, that the Lizardville Ghost Story is a tale of adventure, magical boxes, and strange townspeople and the bonds of friendship. I just love that visual because it really does feel like that small town. For those of us that are Gen Xers or in that area, we could leave the house for hours at a time and nobody questioned it. Nobody knew how to find us. It was a nice bit of freedom that we had. And so as I'm reading these reviews, I feel like you're really kind of rekindling those freedom moments with all of the scary things that are happening behind the scenes.
I would agree with that. I tried to capture a lot of those feelings. A lot of it came from the heart with my experiences as a child. I mean, you're right. We would disappear for hours. We'd come home. When the sun went down, we came home. It was a lot of fun. It all started with a camping trip for me.
What's up next for you?
Well, like I said, Old Man Smithers, that's all wrapped up. It has a October 1st, perfect timing, for the spooky season of Halloween. I will have copies here in about 3 weeks. If you'd like to pick up a personalized copy, you can catch me on the trail on my website, stevealtier.com. Go to the calendar tab and check out where I've got a ton of events lined up for the rest of the year. So you'll be able to pick up a copy there early.
And can you just share with us a little bit about what we can expect from Old Man Smithers?
Well, Old Man Smithers is a character that you first meet in the first book, The Camping Trip, and also in Jimmy's Curse. And he does play, he is mentioned several times in the third and final chapter, the return to Lizardville. But Old Man Smithers, he's a crotchety old man who just doesn't seem to get along with the youth of Lizardville. I wanted to dive deep into that. I had a lot of people saying, I wish I knew more about Old Man Smithers. What was his problem? So I really wanted to dive deep into that and talk about what caused him to hate the kids so much. And his whole world gets turned upside down when there's a horrible, tragic car accident. And that's really the way the book starts. And, when strange, mysterious things begin to happen to him, he turns to his a lifelong friend, Tom. Tom runs the general store. And Tom and his family have a couple little secrets that they kind of like to keep hidden away. And we really dive into a lot of that in Old Man Smithers' story, seances and talking to the dead, as they realize not all things are meant to stay hidden. And they end up opening up a few things that happen in there. They open up, another portal and they start talking to more ghosts.
And one of the things I love is the character development. So it sounds like with the series of the new books, the side stories you're doing, you're really giving your readers that deeper character development of who are they, why are they the way they are, and really just expanding this world you're creating.
Well, absolutely. I think that's really one of the things I've always loved about the way Stephen King writes. He is so descriptive. He talks about it. You get involved so deeply into the story. And I think that if you can open up somebody into a world like Lizardville, and now that you begin to know the area and the characters, you can just continue to feed them more stories in that same part of the country. And it takes you to a different time, a different place. Starting like Old Man Smithers starts in the 60s, a little bit before, leading up to what happened in Lizardville. And that's why, because it's like over a 15-year span.
So I always like to ask our authors that are with us, and you kind of already talked a little bit about this, but what advice would you give to someone out there who's a budding writer, really wants to do the process for them to kind of take that writing plunge?
First off, once you start putting pen to paper, that's something that you have to pat yourself on the back for and say, hey, you're accomplishing something. But I know it's an old cliche, but always follow your dreams. Don't give up on them. I gave up on mine. I got married. I raised a family. I joined the military. Life just kind of got away from me. But as my kids grew older and started moving out and going to college, I went back into writing, and I've been writing about 15 years now. So don't give up on it. You're never too old to go back and start. So read every day, write every day, and keep at it. Don't give up.
So I know you already started telling us a little bit about where we can find your books, but where, anywhere in the country, the world, where can we find your wonderful ghost stories?
So my books are anywhere books are sold. I am with Four Horsemen Publications. They're a mid-level independent publishing house. You can buy them through my website if you're looking for signed copies, or you can buy them through Amazon, any bookstore, Barnes and Noble, Books A Million, through Target, through Walmart, any place that books are sold, they are out. If you want to get signed copies, go to my website, www.stevealtier, that's ALTIER.com, and click on the shop and just tell me you want a signed copy. And if you want it personalized, send me a little message and tell me who to make it out to. I'd be thrilled and honored to do that for you.
Sounds like a great deal.
And so, Steve, you shared your website. Are you on any other social media platforms where our listeners can connect with you?
Oh gosh, yeah, I am on. I like Facebook. I'm on Facebook a lot. I'm on Instagram a lot. Diving into TikTok more. I'm LinkedIn. I'm on pretty much a lot of sites. If you click on my website, you'll see all the links that listed below where you can find me on social media. And I'd love people to reach out. You can also subscribe to my newsletter if you want to stay on top of things there, because I'm always talking about what's new and what I'm working on. And pre-order Old Man Smithers, you can get 15% off there.
Steve, thank you so much for joining us today and being with us and with our listeners. And your new releases sound absolutely wonderful. And we're going to make sure that on our social media and our YouTube channel that everyone has that information to be able to check them out. And I will be sure to share the picture of us hanging out at Comic-Con.
Oh,
Absolutely. And Steve, I'm so excited to connect with you for your upcoming books and have you back on. But until then, everybody, read more books.
And then go explore. Bye.
Bye, everybody.
thank you.